This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Over the last few years, many Hollywood studios, with Disney leading the charge, have gone above and beyond in order to cater to what in recent history has been the second biggest movie market on the planet, namely China. In spite of that though, industry publication Variety suggests that there is a very good chance that Marvel's Eternals and Shang-Chi could end up being banned from being released in the highly lucrative Chinese market. But of all upcoming Marvel movies, why those two in particular? Well, we're about to find out. In this editorial, I will begin by establishing why the Chinese market is so lucrative and what Disney has done to get a foothold there. Then I'll explore the reasons why it is Marvel's Eternals and Shang-Chi in particular that are on the chopping block, and what lessons Hollywood should consider taking from this. Over the past few decades, most Western nations have exported their industries to China, and as a result of that and more, the Chinese economy has grown exponentially. In terms of box office, China was rapidly catching up with North America even before the lockdowns. By now, the Chinese market may, for all intents and purposes, already be the biggest market for movies where wide theatrical releases are concerned. So clearly, Hollywood wants some of that Chinese box office cash. That cash, however, comes with a cost. Unlike the market economies in the rest of the world, where anyone from anywhere can buy entry and compete on equal terms, China doesn't allow foreigners to enter its economy so easily. Where movies are concerned, there's a quota for foreign releases, and for the ones that make it through, most of the revenue stays in China. The only way to be left with a bigger cut is by joining up with a Chinese production and distribution company that is in whole or in part owned by the CCP. And even then, all movies still have to be approved by the Chinese party censorship before they can actually be released in the Chinese marketplace. Disney have done all this, so they are primed to get as much box office revenue out of China as it is possible for any foreign film distributor to get. As Disney's local Chinese branch is effectively co-owned by the CCP, they also have to speak of China in the most positive of ways, which is why local authorities that run, camps in which the undesirables go to concentrate, were thanked for their contributions to the film in the end credits of Disney's live-action remake of Mulan. So, appeasing the CCP is one major hurdle, but there's one more. The sensibilities of the Chinese movie-going public. It was in order to not offend these sensibilities that Disney systematically either removed or shrunk John Boyega from Chinese Star Wars posters. And also why they put a mask on Chadwick Boseman for the Chinese Black Panther poster. But even jumping through all of those hoops does not guarantee a hit, and there are some high-profile examples of that. For the most part, Chinese audiences weren't exposed to the original Star Wars trilogy, and therefore have little attachment to the brand. Without that nostalgia factor, The Force Awakens had to win over Chinese audiences entirely on its own merits, and it failed to do that. All the subsequent Disney Star Wars movies flopped in China. Likewise, Mulan, a movie seemingly tailor-made for the Chinese market, flopped spectacularly in China. By contrast, the Snyder Cut got more than 330 million views on Chinese VOD, without having made any adjustments aimed at Chinese authorities or sensibilities at all. If Warner had tried and succeeded in putting it in Chinese theaters, it would, by all accounts, have been a monster hit. One lesson to take away from that is that no pandering to the Chinese market may be better than pandering that is done in the wrong way. With that in mind, let's explore the first of the two Marvel movies that may be banned in China. And I say may, because according to Variety, this is not yet set in stone, but it's not looking good. Marvel has a habit of paying attention to what DC announces for their movies, and then doing something similar, but in a bigger way. Case in point, Kevin Feige has admitted that Warner announcing Batman v Superman played a big part in Captain America 3 becoming Captain America Civil War. Likewise, it was in the aftermath of Warner announcing Jack Kirby's New Gods with director Ava DuVernay that Marvel announced Jack Kirby's Eternals with Chinese director Chloe Zhao. If she was hired exclusively for her, at the time, limited body of work, or at least in part because the powers that be felt her Chinese heritage would help the movie in China, remains unknown. In either event, corporate owner AT&T would eventually pull the plug on New Gods, while Chloe Zhao would go on to win an Oscar at this year's Academy Awards. However, few in China know that, because that news item was blacked out over there. As Variety points out, in between her signing up to direct Marvel's Eternals and her Oscar win, Chloe Zhao had managed to become persona non grata with the CCP for the high crime of speaking ill of them. That being the case, Chinese authorities are unlikely to allow a movie directed by Chloe Zhao to be released in China. But even if the movie were to be released in China, there is no guarantee it would be successful. Throughout its production, a recurring talking point about the Eternals is how inclusive and diverse it is going to be, especially in terms of LGBTQ characters. This plays very well with the domestic Twitter audience. But it might not play all that well in China these days, where boys increasingly are taught masculinity and how to be manly men. The New York Times references a top Chinese official saying that, in part because of pop culture influences, Chinese boys have become weak, inferior, and timid. All in all, not looking great for Marvel's Eternals in China. But then there is the matter of Shang-Chi, a movie that, unlike the Eternals, seem custom-made for China, in that the character is Chinese. Much of the story takes place in China. It glorifies traditional Chinese martial arts in an era where it's under pressure from MMA, and it features prominent Chinese talent. What could be the problem with that? Well, to find out, we have to go more than a century back in time and to another character altogether. Legend has it that when British writer Arthur Henry Ward, better known under his pen name Sax Romer, used an Ouija board to inquire about how to make his fortune, it spelled out Chinaman. This, then, is said to have inspired the character Fu Manchu. By now, it's been a few generations since Fu Manchu was part of the popular vernacular, so let's do a brief reintroduction. Created in 1912, Fu Manchu is an evil, mustache-twirling, scheming Chinese mystic who is hell-bent on world domination. The name is gibberish, but sounded Chinese-ish, and played into contemporary fears of China taking over the world. The character was featured in the pulp magazines of the time, where he was an instant hit. These pulp magazine stories were later reprinted as a series of novels, and the character exploded from there. A dozen Fu Manchu movies were made from the 1920s up to the 1950s, but most famously, Christopher Lee played him in 5 movies in the 1960s. In the 1970s, Marvel licensed the character for use in their comics, and this is how Shang-Chi first came to be, as the son of Fu Manchu. Later, Marvel lost the rights to Fu Manchu, so they could no longer use that name, but Shang-Chi was one of their original characters, so they kept him. In the upcoming Shang-Chi movie, Fu Manchu is replaced by Wenwu, the real Mandarin. This, however, does not ease the reservations of Chinese fans, who, in addition to not being fans of Fu Manchu, aren't that big fans of the Mandarin either. Variety referenced a number of critical posts from approved Chinese social media, and the users there did not take kindly to the movie. Chances are, Chinese authorities aren't too enthusiastic either, and Fu Manchu is a character they will be very well aware of. The Chinese embassy in Washington issued a formal complaint about the movie The Mask of Fu Manchu way back in 1932. And the US State Department even requested no more Fu Manchu movies be made for a while when China became an ally against Japan during World War II. But the angry ones, though, would appear to be the Chinese fans. Variety references users of Chinese social media saying things like, "So you changed the name and it's not Fu Manchu anymore?" The Mandarin is inherently a character that blackens the image of the Chinese people. And I hope the China censorship authorities won't be bought out by this. This kind of film is not worthy of coming to China to make money off us while calling us fools. That wasn't all. According to Variety, the Chinese cast also doesn't sit well with Chinese audiences, because they don't conform with Chinese standards of beauty. And the trailer was met with a pretty negative response too. All in all, a movie Disney and Marvel designed to be particularly appealing in China appears to be rejected by the Chinese. Again, nothing is decided here, so it's not outside the realm of possibility that one or both movies still could be released in China, but it's not looking good. So, what lessons could be learned from this? The root cause of all of this appears to come from not understanding the audience, and the lesser problem here is actually the Eternals. If Marvel wanted to make a movie based on a Jack Kirby property, The Eternals isn't a bad pick. And had it been directed by another director, it probably would have been released in China. Probably. It still might have been a bit too diverse and too inclusive for Chinese sensibilities. The irony, though, is that director Chloe Zhao could have been chosen specifically to overcome that and ensure a Chinese release. But that pick is the one that by all accounts will close the door on Disney ever seeing any box office receipts on The Eternals from China. But that's bad luck. The plan was a good one right up until Chloe Zhao spoke critically of Chinese authorities. The bigger failure here is actually Shang-Chi. The movie is obviously made for a worldwide audience, but it has all the hallmarks of being tailored to be particularly appealing in China. If not, why make Shang-Chi in the first place? Demand for a Shang-Chi movie isn't that great outside of China. As it turned out though, there is even less demand for a Shang-Chi movie within China. No matter what they do, Shang-Chi started out as the son of Fu Manchu. No matter how much he may have tried in the comics, he will never get out of that shade. After seeing the Chinese reaction, as put forth by Variety, it is clear that the whole project was tone deaf from the get-go. To the creatives in charge at Marvel Studios, Chang-Chi might have seemed like a great idea, but as it turned out, it probably wasn't. Bob Chapek has received much criticism for creating a new organizational structure for Disney where distribution has power over the creatives. But this may be the perfect example of his thinking. Under the new regime, if it were to function as intended, distribution would tell the creatives that wanted to make a Shang-Chi movie that there is very little demand for Shang-Chi outside of China, and there is less than none within. So go back to the drawing board and come up with something else. I'm not saying that is the perfect system, but Shang-Chi is what can happen if there are no checks and balances in place. For Disney's sake, let's hope that they didn't budget these two movies in such a way that they rely on China's box office. Because if they did, that's gonna blow up in their face. This all comes down to them not fully understanding their intended target market. That's vital to reach the target audience, which is equally important in any company, big or small. Anyone starting out in any kind of enterprise, or who have started out but are kind of stuck, needs to build an audience, a customer base, a community to move on to the next level. Someone who can help out in doing that is Squarespace, the sponsors of this video. Whether you are looking to create a website, an online store, or even a blog with commentary features that support threaded replies, Squarespace has you covered and will provide a venue and marketing tools that enables you to build and interact with your audience within your chosen field. Depending on your brand, interest, or enterprise, Squarespace provides numerous templates that can be tailored to fit your needs, allowing you to create the perfect online venue to build and cater your audience or to put yourself and your offering out there. So head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial and to start building the online presence and marketplace you want. When you are satisfied and ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/midnight to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. While you do that, we'll keep you up to date with what happens with the Eternals, Shang-Chi, and Disney under JPEG. For now, let us know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.